welcome back to the fourth part of my Elvish writing series. In this video I'm going to address a couple of points that have been raised since my last upload, and then we'll have a further look into phonetics. Now just a heads up, the first part of this video may seem a little like a science lesson, but it all will make sense by the end. For those of you who are familiar with the Karate Kid movie, think of it as the whole paint the fence, sand the floor thing that Mr. Miyagi said. Anyway. Now, I know I say this every time, but I'm so pleased with everyone that has been in touch with me since I started these videos. I've got to know some really great people, and so many of you write some lovely words, and I really appreciate it. So once again, a very big thank you to everybody, and keep doing it. Anyway, so the first issue I've seen, many of you are asking how to write a specific letter using the Boolean mode from the last video when it doesn't appear in the alphabet. Most of you are asking for the letter J. Now, put simply, you have to remember that Tolkien wrote these alphabets for the elves to speak their language, not English. So if the Grey Elves and the Men of the West who spoke Sindarin didn't have words that use the J, then there's no need for one. Just like there's no need for a V in the Indian alphabet, as I mentioned in my last video. The only alternative is to either use the closest sounding letter, so if one wanted to write the name John, for example, perhaps we could substitute the J for a Y. As a result, this would become Yon, but then you can always think that if a Sindarin elf were to try and pronounce the name John, he would more than likely pronounce it as Jon. Just like English people pronounce the Dutch name Jan, which is J-A-N, as Jan, even though the J character is pronounced completely different in Dutch. Alternatively, you could borrow a character from another alphabet, such as the Quenya mode, but then again, you might as well write the whole word in Quenya, if that was the case. Secondly, many of you have asked whether you should be writing words phonetically when you rewrite them using the Elvish alphabet. For example, the O vowel in the word love is pronounced like a short U vowel, hence the text or SMS spelling L-U-V. Or in some cases, when we get the double vowel, which is simply two of the same vowel adjacent to one another, like the two O's in the word spoon. Again, this sound is produced like a long U vowel, the same as we would pronounce in the word university, spoon, university. So when writing words using the Elvish alphabet, do we use the letters as they're used in English, or do we replace them with the phonetic equivalent? So the right answer there is no right answer, and to be told otherwise is simply wrong. Again, Tolkien didn't create the Boolean mode to write English or any other language. He created it to write Sindarin. So if we are choosing to write words from another language, it's our choice how we write the words. So if we were to write Sindarin words using the mode of Boolean, we'll find that we have all the letters that we need. So anyway, at the end of the day, if we're writing English words using an Elvish alphabet, we're probably doing it because we find the letters pleasing to the eye. A fellow enthusiast, Dan Smith, recently said to me, commenting on my work here on YouTube, that people must remember that writing using the Elvish lettering is more of an art than a science, and he's absolutely right. Incidentally, Dan has done some great work creating fonts for use with Elvish, so if you're looking for something to use when writing Elvish on your computer, then please visit his site, which I've shown below. So, moving on, we'll now look at the table we use to organise the Elvish lettering, but before we do this, we need to understand a little of the science behind pronunciation and phonetics. The way we produce letters fall into a number of categories, which collectively make up what is known as the International Phonetic Alphabet, or the IPA for short. We're concerned with four of these types of pronunciation: plosives, fricatives, nasals, and semivowels. Now we'll look at each of these briefly in turn. So, a plosive is a sound which is made by releasing a short burst of air through the mouth. The most common plosives in English being P, B and D. Okay, now a fricative is a sound made by channeling air through a shape in the mouth and using a part of the mouth to alter the sound. Like the letter F, where we use the bottom lip against our teeth and channel the air through the gap that we make. F. Or the sh sound heard at the start of the word sheep. Here we curl the edges of the tongue to touch the upper teeth and purse the lips. Shh. And we channel the air through the tube shape we make in our mouth. The process of the air made in the mouth is what's known as frication, hence the name fricative. The nasals are letters such as M and N, which are formed by directing air through the nose rather than the mouth. The M, which we use the lips to stop the air, and the N, which uses the tongue. And finally, the semivowels, which are consonants which take the place of a vowel, much like the word funny, where the Y sounds like an E. Therefore, the Y is a semivowel. We also have what's called glides in this same area of the table, and these are sounds which don't fit under either plosive, fricative or nasal grouping, and these are letters such as R and L, as when produced the air glides out of the mouth without obstruction or frication. Now, vowels themselves are very similar to glides in that they also don't have any frication or obstruction, but the air flows freely instead of there being any build-up of air. So a glide such as R, R, when pronounced, builds up a little air to then release, but a vowel uses an open mouth at all times. A, E, I, and so on. So this forms the part of our Elvish table known as the mode of articulation. So I'll now show that on a slide. Okay, so moving on. In addition to this mode of articulation, the plosives and fricatives can be further subcategorised into what we call voiced and unvoiced. Now, I did mention this briefly in an earlier video, but I'll go over it again as it's got a lot of relevance here. Now, a voiced phoneme uses air to make some sort of resonance in our mouths, whereas the unvoiced phonemes simply make a very breathy and airy sound, which doesn't actually produce a resonated sound. For example, the letter P, when pronounced, doesn't produce a noise, it only produces air. So let us take the word plosive as an example. The P sound is a release of air, and the low sound which follows makes the noise plosive. Therefore, the P is a voiceless plosive. The B, on the other hand, when pronounced in a word such as boat, uses an element of resonance which makes a noise b-oat, and therefore is a voiced plosive. Now, we can append those to our table, giving us voiced plosives, unvoiced plosives, voiced fricatives, unvoiced fricatives, and then the nasals and the semivowels. Now, we have the corresponding part of our table, the points of articulation. These are the parts of the mouth which are used when making the sound. For example, the P, as we know to be a plosive, uses the lips to make the sound. Therefore, we call it a labial plosive. And because we know the P to be unvoiced, its full name becomes an unvoiced labial plosive. There are three other points of articulation we need to consider with the Elvish writing modes. We have the teeth, which are used to make the th sound, as I've mentioned again in my previous videos. This uses the tongue against the teeth and is therefore a fricative, and putting that together, a dental fricative. Next is the palatals. These are phonemes which use the tissue at the top of the mouth. The tissue is divided into two areas. You have the soft palate, which is the highest part towards the back of the throat, and the hard palate, which is at the back of the front teeth. The reason why it covers, the reason why it's called a hard palate is because it covers bone, whereas the soft palate at the top, at the roof of the mouth, does not. A good example of a phoneme which uses the palate is the sh sound, as we spoke about just now. This uses the tongue against the hard palate at the back of the teeth, sh, and therefore a palatal fricative. Finally, we have the velars. These are very similar to the palatals, but unlike the palatals, which use the outside edges of the tongue, the velars use the middle part of the tongue. For example, if we raise the middle of our tongue against the soft palate and release a short burst of air, we get the sound G, which is therefore a velar plosive. We can now put these points of articulation against the previous modes of articulation to form the table that Tolkien invented for his Elvish alphabet. We'll now fill this table with some of the letters from the English alphabet and some of those which we've learnt from the Balerian mode which aren't in English. So, the voiceless plosives will include T for the dental phoneme, P for the labial phoneme, Ch, as in chair, for the palatal, as the middle part of the tongue is raised to the hard palate, ch, and the K for the velar voiceless plosive, as the middle of the tongue is up against the soft palate towards the back. Okay, the voiced plosives begin with D for the dental, B for the labial, and then the voiced palatal plosive is represented by an inverted F symbol, and although it's not used in English, it sounds a lot like the phoneme heard at the start of the word jump, jump. This sound is used in some Nordic dialects, and this is the sound that Tolkien found very pleasing. Then we have the velar, which is the G sound, such as in the words go or gum. Now this isn't to be confused with the G in the words such as ginger or gentleman. When you pronounce these words, the G is made using the middle of the tongue on the hard palate instead of the edges of the tongue on the soft palate. So ginger, go. So if you say the two, you'll realise the difference between the palatals and the velars. Now, the voiced and unvoiced dental fricative we have already covered in previous videos as the th phoneme. The unvoiced coming from words such as theme or theory, and the voiced from them or these, where the th makes a slight buzzing sound instead of the breathy th when pronouncing theory. The unvoiced labial fricative is better known as the F, as heard in words such as find or friend, or can be written as a PH, as found in words such as phone or phonetics. The voiced labial is the letter V, again, as it's very similar to the F, but produces a slight buzzing sound when pronounced. Next, we have the voiceless palatal, which is the sh sound mentioned a few moments ago, and the voiced palatal fricative, again, is the equivalent but with a buzzing voice, which makes a j sound. This is represented by a symbol which you may not recognise, as again we don't use this in English, but the closest example is the j sound heard in the middle of vision. Finally, we have the velar fricatives. The unvoiced is close to an H in English, as heard in the words house or home. Again, uses the air rather than a noise. And the voiced example is yet another symbol we don't use in English. This can be represented by a GH combination, but in English we don't produce this H in most cases. Just think of the words ghost or gherkin, and the H is not pronounced. So the voiced velar fricative does produce this H. So if we were to say those words again using this phoneme, it would become ghost or gherkin. Okay, next come the nasals. The first two are simple enough, the dental nasal being the N, as we use the front teeth when pronouncing, and the M for the labial, as we use both lips. Then the palatal nasal phoneme is represented in English as a NY or an NJ, often not used, but it's the sound heard when saying the word onion, which is used in some Southern Europeans, Spanish or Portuguese. Then the velar nasal, which is the NG we've spoken about in previous videos, as heard when saying the words finger or ring. Finally, we come to the semivowels and glides. The plosive being the R, as in road, and the labial being the W, as in water. Now you'll notice that these are quite weak plosives, or half aspirated. That is to say, the R in road doesn't build up and release air quite in the same way as the other plosives, nor does the W have the same sort of strength as a P or an M. It's just water. The palatal semivowel is closest to the Y phoneme, as in Yankee, and the velar would be an L, as heard in words such as lake or luck. Now, here comes the magic. Now, let us replace the letters with the Elvish symbols. Most of these you'll recognise from the last video from the mode of Beleriand. Others have come from another mode just for the purposes of demonstration. For example, the mode of Beleriand doesn't use velar fricatives, so those shown here are from a Quenya alphabet. Now, each Elvish alphabet is different depending on which language it is used to write, just like I said at the start of the video. So if we were writing an Indian Elvish alphabet, we'd have no use for the labial fricative, or the V. Now, finally, if we look at the lettering in this table, we'll notice a pattern in the mode and points of articulation that we've spoken about in this video. For example, all of the Tengwar shown in the plosive row have what's called a long stem. Now, this stem, incidentally, is called a telcor, but we'll refer to it as a stem for now. The fricatives below all used a raised stem, and the nasals and semivowels used a shortened stem. But wait, it gets better. Now, if we look at the unvoiced phonemes, they all have a single bow. This is known as a louver, but again, we'll refer to it as a bow. Then, if we look at the voiced phonemes, they all have double bows. Then, we notice all of the dentals have downward bows, whereas the labials have closed bows shown by a line underneath. Then, the palatals all have upward bows, and the velars all have the same upward, but again, are closed, shown by the line. It's also worth noting that the downward bows are always written to the right of the stem, and the upward bows to the left. Now, this whole process is what has become known as a similar shape, similar sound principle, which is what Tolkien based his whole writing systems on. So, just to recap, let's say we wanted to make a Tengwar symbol for the letter B. So we need only think of how the sound is made. So we've got a plosive, so this would give us the normal stem. Then we know it to be a labial phoneme, which gives us the right-sided bow, as well as the line underneath, making it closed. And then for it to be voiced, we need to give it the second bow. So here we've made the Tengwar for a voiced labial plosive, or the B. Okay, said it all makes sense, hopefully. Right, that wraps up the fourth part of my series. If there's any doubt or you need any help, please leave comments, drop me a mail, I'll be happy to help you. In the fifth video, we'll be looking further into the vowel markings and a Quenya mode, and the differences between the Quenya and the Sindarin. So, until then, I wish you all well and good luck with your practice. And again, please get in touch. I'm happy to hear from you, even happier to help. So, I'll see you soon. Bye.